Super Bowl 57. Historic moment for HACE. Thank you to our partners at the NFL for continuously amplifying the voices of our Latinx, Latine community. To Jonathan Bean, to Josephine Martinez, to Francesca, Andrea, and the rest of the team. I can't name everybody. Marisa, who's going to be joining us on our panel. We are excited and thankful, not just to the NFL to be here, but there's also the asset team that puts a lot of work to ensure that we're here, that we're able to put an amazing content for everyone together. So special thank you to the asset team members, Yasmin, Vanessa, Emmanuel, Justo, Melinda. Raise your hand. Make sure that if you haven't had a chance to talk to the asset team members that you do so. Thank you for all that you do. And also our board members that are here representing from across the nation that are here to support and really be part of this endeavor. Not only our board of directors, but also our National Leadership Council, Advisory Council members. So please wave your hands. Alina, Olga, Delia, Carlos, Lisette. Who am I missing? Anybody? Thank you for joining us. I am proud of being a Latina, Mexican-American, daughter of immigrants, first-generation professional college graduate. And I'm proud to be able to serve my own personal mission as president and CEO of HACE, the Hispanic Alliance for Career Enhancement, a national nonprofit organization whose mission since 1982 is to positively impact workplaces by cultivating the pipeline of talents, providing our community the insight, access, and support to be successful in their careers. And the way that we carry out our mission is with our various partners, nearly 200 corporate partners across the nation that help us carry out through 3 core pillars. One, through talent acquisition programs, services, events, where we're actively connecting our employer partners to anywhere from interns to senior level talents. 2, through pipeline and leadership development, cohort-based programs that help us creates a strong multi-generational support network across the nation, starting as young as the high school level to now, thanks to our partners at HACE, an advanced leadership program as well. And all in between through coaching, through mentorship, through culturally relevant content. And again, what I'm most proud and I get to see day to day is the multi-generational support network that's really pushing and pulling along the way. And so join me in welcoming our national board chair that's incoming for 2023, Alina Moran, who will share a few welcoming remarks with us. Alina?
Gracias, Patricia. So as Patricia mentioned, my name is Alina Moran, and I'm serving as the National Board Chair for HACE. I am super excited. I also have a similar mission and vision to Patricia and to all the wonderful leaders that are here today. I am also a first-generation born Latina, Puerto Riqueña, from immigrant parents. And really what they instilled in me was really the push around education. And I'm so happy that HACE is here to be able to support the next generation of Latinos, not only in terms of the work that happens locally, but also in terms of developing throughout the cycle of life. And for me, it's such an honor to serve as a national board chair because I believe very deeply in my heart the importance of mentorship, of sponsorship, really being able to pull people along the lifeline of what they need from a career path, but also being able to work with corporate partners. So thank you to everyone who supports HACE. We couldn't do it without the corporate sponsorship that we have. If you don't know about HACE and want to know more, please reach out to Patricia or myself because we are always looking for other partnerships and other opportunities to really leverage what is going to be really the majority of Latinos in the upcoming world, right? And so having that global impact, not only here in the United States, but also throughout the world is so important. So welcome, and I'm going to hand it back to Patricia. Gracias.
Thank you, Alina. We are proud to have you as our national board chair. Our executive leadership tours are here to be able to showcase our partners and the leaders from across the nation and their own career trajectory. Every year we come up with a theme as we embark on this tour. and discuss with leaders across the nation in terms of what are various areas that we need to consider as it pertains to the advancement of Latinos. We know that from last year's theme of leading with intentionality, with accountability and transparency, that 50% of our members said that they feel that their organization is strategically inclusive of and supportive to underrepresented groups. Another 50% also said that we, as an affinity group, whether it's ERG, BRG groups, are open and transparent in terms of the challenges that our community faces with other groups and with our company. Meaning that there's a whole whopping 50% more that don't feel included within their organizations, that are not being transparent and are not seeing the accountability. And so this year, with that being considered, we decided to think of ways to continue to build on the momentum that with our partners we've built to encourage our employer partners and members to double down. We will also ask you to take a survey for this year so that we can compile data and be able to report and build off of that. And this year, it's HACE United, accelerating equity with action and accountability. It's about taking best practices and doubling down on those best practices. It's about considering and piloting new possible solutions, all in efforts of accelerating equity, inclusion for all, for everyone, and in partnership with not just Latinos, but for all communities. As we may have heard, and many of us partaked in the event before with my dear friend, Tony Tijerino and the Hispanic Heritage Fund, we know that Latinos bring so much to the table, are the youngest and fastest growing demographic group, and leading with the 2.84 trillion purchasing power, meaning if this community were a country, it would be the 5th largest economy. Latinas opening businesses 6 times faster than any other demographic group. And I had to plug this one in. Since 1982, there have been close to 100 Latinos in the NFL. Progress, and yet Latinos are the least represented in executive roles, 4%, 1% Latinas. And according to the US Department of Labor, both men and women are in the lower level ranks and lowest paid. It's time for us to accelerate Unidos, and to help us kick off this conversation today, along with our panelists, we've asked for Ms. Monica Villalobos to keynote with us today to share her own personal experiences, but also being a local representation here for the state of Arizona and all of the great work that's being done. Let me share a little bit about Monica before she joins us on the stage. She serves as president and CEO for the Arizona Hispanic Chamber, and also the Foundation Executive Director for 7 years. In this role, she's responsible for the strategic growth of the Chamber, also the operator of the Phoenix MBDA Business Center. Her background and experience, as well as a corporate marketing executive and as entrepreneur, is a unique combination in skill set. She's got some history, which I'm sure she'll share with the NFL. She shared with us at dinner, but also 7 years leading an annual Datos, stating the state of Arizona's Hispanic market, Datos Tucson, Minority Women, Hispanic Family-Owned Business Enterprise reports. And I have to tell you, the list goes on and on and on as it pertains to supplier diversity and other unique initiatives. She's also done a lot of research and a lot of great work in various sectors. And also another most recent accolade, which it's a big effort, right, is co-chairing for the state of Arizona's governor transition team. Monica, welcome, and please join me in welcoming Monica to the stage.
Thank you so much, Patricia. It is a pleasure to be here with all of you today. As you heard, I am with the Arizona Hispanic Chamber, but my title is actually a little different. I'm Chief Chancla Officer. So if you start to doze off and you feel a little hit, you'll know where it came from. But again, it is a pleasure to be here with HACE and with Patricia and their entire team. Welcome back to the NFL, to the Valley of the Sun. This is the place to be. We got it to a brisk 70 for you. I hope you all feel that's okay. Again, it is just amazing and incredible to be able to have the NFL here. I do want to share a little bit of background and just a little bit about Arizona and the work that we're doing here, because it's so important. And I think I know a lot about good weather. I grew up in Los Angeles. Good weather, rough neighborhood. I grew up in East LA, Lincoln Heights, if anybody's from Los Angeles. Yeah, okay, there you go. And so that you had two choices in this neighborhood, right? You could either get arrested or get an education. And I chose the latter. So I was able to attend UCLA. I graduated with a double major in linguistics and psychology. I went on later to do a master's at Seton Hall University. And now I'm finishing my doctorate at USC. So thank you. Thank you. Less than 1% of Latinas have their doctorate. And I want to be on the good side of statistics, right? So it has been challenging, but I think one of the most important things I have learned is you need to know your worth and you need to know that you're worthy. Those are two really important things in your career as you think about how you're going to enhance your career. And so for me, again, I can remember going into my first interview after UCLA, and I thought, wow, this is going to be my first job. This is amazing. And I went in, and the VP, it was an advertising agency, and the VP looked at me and he said, "Do you know what we do in advertising?" And I tried to come up with a really collegiate answer. Yes, you take a product and you provide messaging around it and marketing. And he said, no, we sell things to people they don't need. And so at that point, I figured I have really blown this interview. I'm not getting this job. And then he leaned in and he said, "Do you have a moral dilemma with that?" And I said, "Listen, I'm living below the poverty line. I don't have any moral dilemmas. I can't afford them." And he gave me the job. And I walked out and I was so excited and I knew what my start date was. And then I got home and I thought, are they going to pay me? I didn't even ask how much the salary was. So I called up and I said, "Oh, I'm so excited. Thank you so much. Is this a paid position?" And he said, "Oh, yeah, and we're going to give you X amount for your salary." And I thought, oh my gosh, thank goodness. And then I went in to go tell my mom, I'm like, Mommy, I'm so excited. I got my first real job, and this is how much they're going to pay me. And it was the same amount that she was making. It wasn't a whole lot, but I thought she had been a Catholic school teacher for 30 years and they were going to pay me the same amount they were paying her after 30 years. And she's like, "Mija, they're not going to make you run drugs or anything, right?" And I'm like, no, it's nothing like that. And so the career began, right? I lived in 5 states in 5 years, including Arizona. I ended up in New York. I did a little stint as an in-house consultant with the NFL, which was fantastic. And it was a great learning experience. And all along the way, it was more and more learning. And so for me, by the time I got to New York and lived there for 10 years, I was also a co-owner of ShopRite Supermarkets. We were the only Hispanic or the first Hispanic owners of the 44 owner cooperative, 219 supermarkets in the tri-state area. So I figure if the CEO thing doesn't work out, I can bag groceries because I'm really good at that. And so you start to learn what those values are, what's important, what are you worth, and that you're worthy. And one of the things when I speak to different groups, I talk about the 3 L's of leadership. And that's really learning and living and listening. And I'll tell you a little bit about each of those. The first one really is listening. Listen. Make sure you're not already listening. That was an important lesson that I learned from a mentor of mine who said, you cannot be defensive all the time. You hear about people walking around with a chip on their shoulder. Mine was like a rock, right? And I carried it around. And when somebody said something, I was like, Ike, I know, Ike. Always ready and always listening and programmed to be defensive. And so already listening was not serving me well. And that's another thing that a mentor shared with me about. Make sure you let go in your career of the things that don't serve you anymore. And that was a really important lesson for me to learn. And then also being able to learn. I'm a lifelong learner. I love learning. One of my favorite quotes is from Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz, and she said, "I study not to know more, but to ignore less." And for me, that has been incredibly powerful, knowing that I can constantly take in this information and then share it. That's the important part, the second part, right? You have to share that information. And then finally, live out loud. Bring your whole self to the marketplace. Bring your whole self to the workplace. Make sure that you're leveraging that. If you are bicultural, bilingual, multicultural, multilingual, you are a commodity. You're bringing multiple perspectives to your workplace, and that is worth a lot. And so what we're finding here in Arizona is that our workforce is really growing rapidly. I'm going to share a little bit of our datos with you. And we know that here in Arizona, Latinos are 30% of the state, 40% of Phoenix Metro, and more than 50% of our K through 12 system. The future is Hispanic. We know that we're 25% of all small businesses in Arizona. And we're spending $65 billion in Arizona's economy. So we're putting in a lot more than the myth of what we're taking out. And so it's a good day to be Hispanic in Arizona. It's a good time. Despite our public policies that can sometimes be wonky, we'll have to, use that word. And we know that Latinos are thriving in Arizona and really making a huge difference. And so when you think about your own careers, my path was one where I struggled. I promise you, I made every single mistake there is to make. And I am unapologetically flawed in that sense, but learn from each other, right? We have to lift each other up. And eventually we realize that our worth is not in our salary. Our worth is in our relationships. And that's why we continue to make those relationships, to build those bridges. And the theme for this particular event and that HACE has brought on accelerating equity is so important. One of the things that we're really proud of at the Arizona Hispanic Chamber of Commerce is the Community Collaborative. When I took this role on in 2019, I reached out to the president and CEO of the Black Chamber, and he brought along the Asian Chamber, the American Indian Chamber, the Association of Minority Contractors of Arizona. And together, we started to work on diversity and inclusion. That group that started 3 years ago is now 36 organizations strong. We meet once a month. It's a very informal group, but we are constantly working together. And let me tell you, during the pandemic, that was one of the most powerful tools that we had, to be able to share with each other, to collaborate it, because we knew we were stronger together. A few other things that I'm really proud of since I've been in this role is having doubled our revenues during the pandemic. We are a $3 million organization making a $200 million impact in Arizona's economy. In addition to that, we've expanded. I know we're the Arizona Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, but we've expanded into Nevada and Utah as well. And so that's been exciting for our team. And, I think ultimately for us, what we have found is that being able to work with other organizations, learn from each other, bring those best practices to our own organizations has ultimately made us stronger. So when you think, again, about your worth, know that you are worth a lot more than you think. You pick a number and then double that, because that's your worth in today's marketplace. And What's most important, what I'm here to tell you, and I'll be honest, I am the biggest hypocrite on the planet, because I tell people every day, embrace your power. This is all about you. You've got this. And then somebody will say something like, Monica, you're getting the 2022 OTLI Award, and I want to recognize our Consul General de Mexico, Jorge Mendoza Yescas, who's here with us. Gracias. When I received the OTLI Award, I was like, he must be talking about some other Monica Susana Villalobos, because it couldn't be me. And so that's why I say I'm a bit of a hypocrite, but I am all about making sure that we lift each other up and that we make each other proud, that we're accountable to each other. That's our role. So I know we're short on time. I'm going to cut it short, but I want to thank you so much for being here. I also want to recognize, obviously, the NFL, HACE, your team, your board, for bringing us together and making it a great Super Bowl week, because we are worthy. Thank you so much.
Gracias, Monica. Hey, this Mexicana's got her eye on the OTLI Award. Just throwing it out there to the universe. What an accomplishment. Thank you, Monica. That is something that I have to always, and when we're talking to our groups, is talk back to that little voice in our head that sometimes says, oh, you're not ready enough, you're not worthy enough. And I talk back to it quite often to make sure, like, yes, this is the time, we're ready. And that being said, please join me in welcoming our panelists to the stage to join us in dialogue as we take a deeper dive in this theme. And so you'll also see them on the screen. So whoever wants to come up for, I'll start with Christina Kolbjornsen, so the SVP for NBC Telemundo. Pick a seat. We have Javier Loya, who is a minority owner of the Houston Texans. And our host, Marisa Solis from the NFL, who is the SVP, Chief Marketing Officer, La Jefa for the NFL.
You just promoted me.
La Jefa.
Thank you.
Well, her jefe is here, but she's the jefa, right? Jonathan?
It works.
He's our colleague. Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for taking time to join us in this conversation, which is a historic and a very proud moment for ASE to be here during the NFL, the 57th NFL Super Bowl experience week that we have going on today. And so we talked about ASE United accelerating equity with action and accountability. And so we wanted to start off by taking a deep dive on what is equity. And so I have a couple of questions for you all regarding equity. But before we jump in, just give us a little bit, maybe a fun fact or anything you want to share about yourself before we jump into the questions. Cristina.
All right, a fun fact about me. So I am, to Monica's comments earlier, multicultural, live in Miami. I have been living in Miami longer than anywhere else before. Fun fact, I grew up in Haiti. So I speak fluent French and Creole as well. And I have 2 amazing boys. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Cristina.
Wow. Okay. Fun fact, I guess, that I've got 2 girls, and I have a day job. I'm not just with the Houston Texans. I actually have a company. I'm an entrepreneur like muchos Latinos. I've got a company in commodity brokerage. And I was thinking, fun fact, gosh, because I'm next to media, and I guess NFL would be considered media, I once broadcasted a football game in Spanish. Only one, because they didn't invite me back again.
Thank you. Marisa?
Awesome. Well, fun fact, I have a daughter too, 17. I'm from Mexico City, El DF, as they call it. But my fun fact, I never considered myself an athlete. So it's great to work for the NFL.
but I didn't realize I have a black belt in Taekwondo. I have a 3rd degree black belt. So I guess that is being an athlete. I didn't know, breaking boards was, I guess that is athletic too. So I'm an athlete. I'm a 3rd degree black belt. So
Own it, Marisa.
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. So I wanted to start off by, I had the opportunity to be at the World Economic Forum, serve as the 2nd time as a delegate. And the World Economic Forum is setting the agenda for the world, right? And there's a lot of conversation regarding the ESGs, environmental, social, and governance, right? The S is where the DEI is based, right? When it pertains to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and in terms of how are we, and when we talk about DEI, it's about the impact on people, right? How are we ensuring that they feel that they're going to a workspace where they feel included, that they can truly, authentically lead and really be who they are and thrive in that. And so the equity piece is about how are we meeting people where they are so that we could move the needle together. And so Marisa, I'll start with the first question to you regarding what's your personal experience with equity? Is there a story you can share where you may or may not have experienced it in terms of having access to resources along the way?
Yeah, I want to share 2 really quick stories. One where I was definitely excluded from the table and was not an equitable example. And then one where I was actually given an opportunity because of who I was. Very, very early in my career, actually my very first advertising campaign, I had the opportunity at 23 to go to the advertising agency and lead the campaign. And when I was introduced to a group of all men, by the way, I was the only woman there, the owner of the agency said, "Welcome, Marisa. This is Susie, my assistant. Why don't you ladies go have some coffee while we men talk business?" And at 23, I looked at my boss thinking he would say something, and he didn't. So that was the one moment where I said, I have to take my own place at the table because nobody is going to offer it to me. And that was my inequitable experience that opened the door to give me the courage to demand, equity for myself. Fast forward many, many years later, I was given the opportunity at my previous company, PepsiCo, by a very, very senior leader to lead the first ever Hispanic business unit for PepsiCo. And the reason I was given the opportunity, I was told, was because of who I was. So it was the fact that I was a Latina leader, that I knew the community, that I understood our taste and how to market, that I was given that opportunity. So 2 different examples of very inequitable and not including you, and then really seeing you for who you are and your talent and giving you the opportunity to succeed. So I think that in the contrast, you can see the power of what equity means.
Yeah, and the difference it does for your career trajectory. I also do want to acknowledge, because I know we have folks on the live stream, so just making sure that we know you're here. Thank you for joining us. We will have an opportunity for questions as well. Cristina, so for you in the workplace, what does equity look like? What are some practices, procedures that you have put in place or you've seen for your company to be able to ensure that, again, we're meeting employees where they are to be able to support their own development and advancement?
Thanks for that question. So at Telemundo, as you can imagine, equity looks a little bit, diversity and inclusion and equity looks a little different than perhaps corporate America. We are a company that we're predominantly Hispanic, for Hispanics, about Hispanics, and we take the responsibility of portraying the Hispanic community very seriously. So we kind of look at it from a very different lens in making sure that the Hispanic among us, right, represent our community. And then of course there's the gender piece that comes in and the inclusion piece, but it's really looking at it from a very different lens than I would imagine. I see Marisa shaking her head. So to that end, we have established practices that really help us advance women. In the media world, there are a lot of specific departments that may be leaning one way toward the other. And we also want to make sure that from a diversity perspective, we attract talent that represent the whole of Hispanic America, right? So whether it's not just from an ethnicity perspective, but also, do we look like the communities that we are serving? Does our programming represent, right, our audience? And do we speak to that? Do we cover the issues that matter to them, right? Not just us who are working there. So from that standpoint, we have a number of programs that we have put in place. I'll just call out one in particular is near and dear to my heart, and that is around the advancement of women. Because we take it so seriously, about 5 years ago, we launched a new initiative that we called Unstoppable Women, Mujeres Imparables. And it is an initiative that we work both internally and externally in really helping Latinas advance and grow in their professional career. So we do it internally by highlighting what that looks like, offering career advancement initiatives and courses and professional growth and opportunities for our women who are part of our workforce, but then externally as well, right? So we go and we talk to and embrace programs that support Latina women, Hispanic women throughout our entire community to also help them see themselves, help you see your worth, and know that you too can achieve whatever unstoppable means to you. You too can also be a success no matter what you do or who you are or where you're from. And that really is empowering and coming from a place where we can really put the trust out there that we can help you see yourselves through our screens, but also give you the tools and resources that help you advance in that journey.
And you all also support our Mujeres de HACE program, which is a Latina program that we have that it's not just the feel good, but you do see the needle move in terms of women that participate within less than a year. 70% are getting promoted and increase of pay in the workplace. And so, and that's the equity, is providing those safe spaces where you're hearing some of the things, the challenges, right, that women are facing that they're not necessarily sharing with their colleagues back in the workplace. And so I love that example.
And I also think that example also speaks to that dual purpose, right? So for the HACE Mujeres de HACE program, we also offer it to our own employees across NBC Universal and across Telemundo, but also to the external audience, right? So we kind of get everyone sort of in together to learn from each other, but also help advance and make connections. And that is...
Yeah. They hosted our Miami cohort, such a beautiful space there. I think the women keep asking if they can go back. So Javier, earlier I mentioned a statistic regarding Latinos and 4% in the C-suite executive level roles, right? And Latinas specifically at 1%. What is your organization doing to boost numbers, or what is advice that you would have?
Well, I've got an interesting perspective because, as I mentioned, I'm an entrepreneur, but I'm also an investor with the Texans. And with the Texans, and I represent kind of the Houston Texans' interests at the NFL level. And so, as I think about, these awful numbers, right? Because at the end of the day, it's about career enhancement, it's about good business, and ultimately, if you're selling a product, you want to sell it to your audience. And so, when we looked at this, and the Houston Texans, I'm not sure if you know much about our team, but certainly you've heard of Houston, and Houston's the most diverse city in the country. And it's a majority minority city, Hispanics being the majority, over 40%. And so when the Houston Texans first started out, Bob McNair, purposeful, good businessman, said, hey, we need a team, we need ownership that represents our community, because we want people to buy into this team. And so we started out that way. And most recently, different challenges that we've had in the NFL, and which has been trying to affect change on the coaching level. The NFL over the last couple of years asked us, as they did every team, can you send us your demographics? Tell us what your employees look like. Share that with us. And so on a voluntary basis. And so we did that. And as in the process of doing that, we realized, lo and behold, wow, we're not living up to our own standards. We don't have near the amount of minorities we have that represent and look like our community. And so what we did is, you talk about how do we make this change, at least for the Houston Texans, what we did was basically first kind of measure where you are, what are we doing? And so for us, the measuring standpoint was, what does our community look like? What are the ethnic percentages there? And then what we did was, let's look at our most loyal fans, which are our season ticket holders. What do they look like? And so now with all the modern ticketing, you can get that information. And so we noticed that we were really low on the Hispanic side. And so we're putting incentives together. And now we've got a policy across the board, not just at senior level, but any employee at the Houston Texans, any position has to have a minority candidate. And if a minority candidate does not earn that job, then who's ever responsible, senior management has to have an answer as to why. Now, they're not mandated to hire. We're still looking for the best person there, but those are some of the things that we're doing to affect that change. And then ultimately also, as we know that once it's hard enough recruiting talent, but once you have the talent, then you've got to change the culture. It's got to be, you got to feel comfortable that you're there, right? Because it's a competitive market space. People are going to move around. You want them to feel like, hey, this is where I want to be and this is where I want to grow. So part of doing that was doing some different things we've done, created a diversity inclusion council, as well as created transparency so that people know where they stand and they know how they can climb up. So those are some things we're doing at the Houston Texans. Certainly I do it at my company. But at the end of the day, it's better than best practices. It's just smart business.
Thank you, Javier. And so this conversation, right, is in terms of what are some of the practices that's being taken into account? You as leaders within your organizations can be taken into account, again, to be able to accelerate the great work that is being done and to move the needle. I know we have also good friends here from the Latino Corporate Directors Association. I'm looking at you, Ozzy and Esther Aguilera, who are really making great strides to make sure that there's more Latinos on corporate boards. And so I just want to make sure if you get to talk to him and ensuring that not only are we getting them into these senior level roles, but in influential roles such as corporate boards, right? So thank you for being here, Ozzy. So I want to shift my second question around, and you touched on it, Javier, on the accountability piece, right? And you talked about some of the measures being done around that. What do you think? So I'll start with you, Javier. And why do you think it's important not to attach incentives to DEI benchmarks? Shouldn't it be a priority in the system in terms of the process and implementation across the organization?
Hit the wrong button. Oh, there we go. I'm a huge believer in incentives because I think, to effectuate change, we're past the day of just best practices and do what's right. So I think you got to be purposeful about it, but it's got to make sense. And so as I think about, incentives, the most visual one, or the one that maybe because we're here talking about football and it's Super Bowl week, would be on the NFL league level. I've had the privilege and honor to represent the Houston Texans at the diversity committee since its inception with senior Dan Rooney when he first started. And so the challenge we had at the NFL level was how do we get more minority head coaches? And so from that process, we've had a lot of great wins, from the football ticketing office to different levels of corporate NFL, but we've still had a lot of challenges at the head coaching level because there's only so many jobs that come up per year. But we went from back then when we first started to being punitive, meaning if you didn't follow the policy, then you could get fined, you could lose a draft pick, until most recently, in the last 2 years, in the last hiring cycle, we passed a rule from our committee that ownership passed, was basically, hey, let's make this a positive. Let's put some incentives for teams to groom their own talent and find talented minority coaches that if they get hired away, they will get compensated. In this case, third-round draft pick. And so one great example, the Houston Texans just hired DeMeco Ryans, great coach. But you know what? Part of the story that hasn't been told, and I'm sure it's being told in the West Coast, San Francisco is going to gain, another draft pick because of it. And this is not their first one. They've had two coaches, Coach McDaniel and Coach Sala, last year they were hired, and they received draft picks. So believe me, I believe in the incentives, and I think you're going to see more and more teams think purposefully about, okay, you know what? Maybe we don't have the head coach, or if all things considered and there's a talented position coach, do we go with the Anglo? Do we go with the minority? Well, you know what? Let's go with minority because it makes good business.
And I know a lot of our corporate partners are tying executive bonuses to that. So that's another example of some of the incentives that we see that are being leveraged. Thank you, Javier. Marisa, can you share an example of where you yourself perhaps held someone or a group accountable for an initiative or key actions as it pertains to progress?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I would say at the National Football League, we have great accountability partners in, our DEI partners, Jonathan Bean, Josephine Martinez. We have a scorecard in place to make sure we're building the right team by recruiting the right diversity. We're retaining the team. We're training and advancing women and diverse people of color. I would say in my particular area, as it relates to the brand and marketing, I have a real responsibility to make sure that we tell the stories of every one of our players, of our fans. These are diverse stories that need to be told. So I need to hold my agencies accountable to make sure that the right diversity is in front of the camera as well as behind the camera. So it's not only putting all of the diverse stories out there, but it's making sure that the writers, the directors, the producers come from diverse backgrounds and that we are elevating those creators as well. So I hold my agencies accountable as well to make sure that they bring diversity to the table just as we need to.
Thank you, Marisa. Anything, Cristina, you would add on that?
No, I completely agree. I think if you don't hold folks responsible for the outcome, it won't get done. So there has to be some kind of accountability at the end of the day. And similar to both of your examples, we instituted similar processes in establishing a baseline and goals in terms of like, what does it look like? What does success look like, right? And having these conversations from the top down. I think that's like hugely important to really have buy-in from as high up as you can so that it filters down to the importance of making that change and seeing it come through, building those dashboards, reporting out on those numbers and calling it out. This did not, what did work and what didn't work, what happened, what didn't happen, and having an honest and transparent, true conversations like, what are we going to change, right? So that the next time around, the next year's dashboard does not look like the previous year's dashboard. So I think it's really about having those open, honest conversations backed by data and really holding everyone accountable for what it is that we need to change. We need to be the ones affecting change. We can't do it alone. DEI is the work of everyone. It's not about you're leading DEI efforts, so it's on you to change the entire culture of a company or of a department, right? You have to be able to really help everyone, the entire culture, understand why it's important and why we all have to lean in and get it done.
Absolutely. I do wonder, and I'm not posing the question, but if you want to discuss it, with the recent, the data, you talk about data, you look at the Department of Labor announcing record number employment, right? Over 500,000. But we also know about the tens and thousands of jobs, specifically tech and now other industries that have layoffs going on. I do wonder if we take a deeper dive, what percentage are of underrepresented groups that are impacted by both, right? And so something that I think needs to be part of the accountability process since it's impacting, right, everyone in terms of the employers that we're working with and obviously the employees. It's still touching base on the accountability piece. Does your anybody feel free to answer? Does your organization offer forums, or I know they do, but can you share examples in terms of for folks to be able to come together and have that space where it's transparent and they can clearly see this is what the organization is doing, this is what I can do for my pathway here?
I mean, I can start. We clearly have the formal forums,
Mhm.
right? We have our ERGs that are very active, that come together to share ideas. They give feedback to our senior leaders to make sure that the environment is equitable. But I think it's in the real day-to-day world where things matter and really make the biggest difference. So it is in the conversations amongst our team when we're having an initiative, trying to push a campaign. When, as a very simple example, when we're talking about social media and what kind of stories, again, we elevate, it is making sure that we're bringing people of diverse perspectives. It's not just this ERG or that ERG. It is everyone coming together from different walks of life, different backgrounds, to really think through how to present the information. That's when it makes, I think, the most impact. And we make ourselves, give the opportunity to our people to be empowered to come and tell those stories, not just within, a formalized group, but in the informal meetings when you're making the impact on the work. Because when people are heard, and when their work is seen, that's when they feel the most empowered. And that's true inclusion, right? Really empower them to make an impact on your organization.
Yeah, and for ERGs, BRGs, if you may not be familiar, like employee resource groups, business resource groups, affinities, that all of your companies have, but provide that space for folks to be able to come together with similar shared backgrounds. Christina, anything you would add on?
So definitely on the ARGs, we have obviously similar setup. But I think importantly, what has worked really well, at least at Telemundo, when we doubled down on our DEI efforts, and when I came in, I also instituted what I called our diversity champions. And what it was, it's like a voluntary stretch assignment that I have a diversity champion that is not an ERG lead, that is embedded in the business. And their role is to really continue to drive those informal conversations about DEI within the space that they work in. And it's another informal way of really having transparent conversations, of talking through what is working, what isn't working, what are we missing, but also having that seat at the table that they would not necessarily have had if they did not have that extra hat of diversity champion, and being heard for bringing that conversation and that topic over and over. And so I think that also also elevates the importance of that conversation, right? Because all of a sudden, each department has diversity champions. They have the ability to get together, to pull each other together to talk through a problem or to elevate important conversations that are to be had, and hold their counterparts in their respective departments accountable for the work that they're doing.
Wonderful. Anything you would add to that?
No, I wholeheartedly agree. I think, but our perspective or our experience with the Houston Texans was a little bit different, which is usually, the challenge is to get buy-in from the highest level, from ownership. We were the other way around. Ownership from the very start said, hey, we want to be diverse, and we've got a who's who ethnic diverse group of ownership, including myself as a Hispanic owner. But what happened over the course of 20 years, if that culture didn't permeate through the rest of the decision making, the everyday, the hires, then it becomes what we found insufficient in what we were trying to accomplish. And so some of the things that came out of our report, our voluntary report that we sent to the NFL, was again showing that we were lower on some of the levels we wanted to be if we wanted to be representative of our community. And so what we did was we set up a diversity and equity and inclusion group, but not one that came from HR, because I think that's the typical response. We felt like it would be okay. This is the corporate thing to do. We said, no, we're going to do it different. we're going to set one up, but we're going to set it up with different leadership and then open it to everybody. And then it's going to be a forum not just to discuss, okay, affinity groups or cultural things that are important, but no, this is an open forum to say, what do you want? And of course, like any business, it's pay. How do I make more money and how do I climb the corporate ladder? So from our group, from DEI came, you know what? There should be bonuses for everyone. Not well, of course, everybody wants free money and free stuff, but no, I mean, it's like, how can people earn bonuses rather than just a sales group? And so from there, we developed a program that everybody has a chance to earn those bonuses and those kinds of things. Now it's not, you know, it's still a business, so it's still about performance, but from an affinity, from DEI and buy-in, we were able to kind of effectuate change across the whole organization, which at the end, that's what you want to do. You want to change the culture.
Wonderful. Thank you. And so we're going to go into our last round of questions and have your questions prepared because we'll have time for the audience to ask questions as well. And I know Monica mentioned this in her remarks in terms of giving examples and partnering and working together with other organizations. And as we look at the Hispanic, Latinx, Latina community, you know, we represent here in the U.S. at least 27 countries of origin. Some of us are immigrants, first, second, third, fourth, fifth generation. Not everybody speaks Spanish. And then the way that we choose to identify is very, it varies, right? And so, but we're also part of many other communities as you're trying to see the intersectionality that we represent, such as some of us are also part of the Black community, LGBTQIA, and so many other identities that we have. And so I will give a shout out for Black History Month because I know we have a lot of our Afro-Latinos, our Black Latinos,
You're here.
that are such a significant part of our community, which is why it's critical that we're partnering with our Black community members, with so many others. And so on that piece, on the unity piece, and I'll start with you, Javier, right? And the only way to see progress and to have it accelerate is by doing so together. What recommendations or actions do you have for organizations, for individuals to ensure that we are accelerating progress together and effectively moving the needle where we are seeing more Latinos in executive roles, where we are seeing more Latinos in positions of power and influence, such as you all here? Javier?
You know, I mean, I think like today is a great day. I mean, what HACE is doing, the advocacy, what the Arizona Hispanic Chamber of Commerce is doing, these are important roles that we have, that both corporate America, myself, my company, the NFL, comes together to not only share best practices, but that advocacy, those data that you share with us, those statistics do matter. I mean, they're real. I mean, they're measuring points that say their accountability. But to take it one step further, I think just in my experience, both from as an entrepreneur and then also with the NFL, it's a competitive marketplace. So I'm sure if we talk to every Fortune 500 company, they're going to have a very robust DE&I policy and initiatives to do it. But at the end of the day, the numbers aren't quite there, right? It's hard. It's hard to find good, talented people of any ethnicity. And so I think one of the roles that affiliated groups can have is that recruitment, is that identifying and recruiting talent. So absolutely, I've gone to our own Hispanic Chamber of Commerce in Houston to look for talented Latinos and Latinas. I think working with the colleges, working with groups, like I said, to help identify who those people are. I mean, you know, as many Latina entrepreneurs as we have, I mean, there's very talented business people that can either partner up or be acquired by many of these companies. So I think identifying and recruiting talent is one way that can help effectuate those numbers, but it's going to take some time. And part of like our experience with the NFL too is a lot of corporate America likes to homegrown their own talent. So helping students, you know, apply for those companies, and then continued education, mentorship is super important. So finding a mentor, and that mentor doesn't have to look and sound like you. There's going to be, you know, there's going to be champions in the organization that are non-minority that want to see change and want to see their company prosper.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of great points there. I think it's not just bringing the talent in, it's also keeping or retaining them. And I know especially Gen Z, there's a lot of data out there. They don't see themselves represented, they don't feel, they're out the door right away, right? And so, but also, how are we rethinking the way that we're hiring and bringing talent? It's part of us accelerating progress. Marisa, can you add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you mentioned it's hard to find good talent out there. I would probably challenge that. I think there's amazing talent out there. I think we need to rethink how we think of that talent. And I'll give you a perfect example. We are living it this week. Super Bowl 57, the National Football League, it takes hundreds and hundreds of individuals in the league to put this week together. And every single individual contributes something special and unique to this week. And if we can find that unique talent, I mean, I look at the artwork that, is adorning the city of Phoenix. I look at, the
Can you
behind
share,
the
because
scenes.
maybe not everybody was here for the previous,
Well,
who's done the artwork?
Well, I don't know if everybody
Okay.
is aware, but for the first time in the history, we have the first ever Native American Chicana who designed the entire, Super Bowl artwork, the ticket. There's a beautiful mural. So partnerships like that. But, I look at the team that we have experts in, PR that are bringing the media. We have operations experts that are going to make sure that this whole week in the game is exciting. We have, there's just so many different things that put this week together. And that's where I think the magic of having an organization, to your point, it's got to be about smart business. You got to grow your revenue and your profit. But to do that, you need a lot of individuals doing a lot of different creative and unique things to make that happen, right? And so we got to think through what those are and go out there and find those individuals and empower them and let them go. To your point on Gen Z, you got to let them know that you believe in them and let them contribute. If they don't feel they're contributing, they're not going to be part of your organization, right? So it's a little bit of a different perspective, I guess, that we got to think about.
Absolutely. And I think that's part of what the theme with ASA, it's looking at what's working out there, what's not working, and how do we rethink, right, in order to try things out. At ASA, right, we're working with a cybersecurity firm, and the intent with this cohort is half of them will be entry-level individuals seeking to get into the cybersecurity industry. The other half are career changers. And with this partnership, the company is going to train them and hire them. And that's a cybersecurity job. That's life-changing in terms of the salary for many people. And it is my hope that we're working with partners to rethink how they're bringing the talents in, right? So that we can ensure that we're providing the opportunity for all. And so my last question, Cristina, and anybody else to weigh in, is, regarding how do you build that sense of unity, whether it's within the team or across organizations, and how do you celebrate those wins?
So there's nothing more rewarding, I think, than just providing that feedback, because feedback is a gift. And then so it's really kind of like rethinking that word as not being like, it's not a criticism, it's feedback, because feedback helps you grow and helps you know yourself better and know what to do differently next time, or celebrating the wins. So from a team perspective, right, having that open forum, but also having that comfort and trust level that anything is on the table, help to ensure that the true conversations are happening. I know on my end with my team, but also across the organization, I purposely hold team huddles that are completely open forum for everyone, regardless of what their thought process, whether they are agreeing or disagreeing with a decision or the way that a specific campaign or initiative should progress. Your opinion matters. Your opinion count. Everyone has something to contribute, whether you're at the entry level or your VP position. We all have a say. And then I think what's really important, at least to me, and what I am dedicated in doing is helping my team be front and center with the senior most executive team. I think it's hugely important in the professional growth, but also to kind of help them move forward and be pushed forward. So I'm not the only one presenting, right, campaign X or initiative Y. I help my team be the voice of what it is that we have produced as a whole, be the ones to be the one presenting in the boardroom on behalf of the team. It doesn't always have to be about me, the senior leader, being the one carrying the torch, but really giving them a forum to be seen, to be heard, and to be challenged. Because with that, so much more comes of it. And ensuring that after the meeting, they are talked about, right? Talking about someone, rising someone to the conversation when they're not in the room is so critically important, because that's when you affect change.
Absolutely. Anybody else want to add on this piece?
I would say,
Yeah.
you said it, Christine. I mean, everybody wants to add value.
Mhm.
That is, we want to add value. And I think if you share the goals of your organization in a way where every single person in that organization feels that when they're coming to work, they are contributing to that goal, whether it's the revenue goal, the profit goal, it is ultimately about the number. But how do I, in my everyday job, contribute? Because if everybody feels that they are adding to that value, that they are building the organization, that they are being seen by the most senior of leaders because of that value they provide, then you're going to have a motivated and empowered workforce. The ideal of us creating that inclusivity will happen. It's got a long way to go, but we have to start there.
And even I would say it's the most challenging it's ever been. You're talking about a lot of things that are happening in society, and our own personal lives don't stay outside the workplace. They come with you, right? And so I was reading an article in terms of the people manager now has to be like the therapist, the coach. There's all of these multiple hats that, and our managers or people leaders really trained. And what does that mean when it comes to building inclusive spaces? I know that's a whole nother conversation, but that adds so much more in terms of making it that much more difficult, right? To lead people and ensure that you're doing so effectively, right? So anything, Javier, you would add?
No, I wholeheartedly agree. But and this transcends not just minorities. I mean, this is now the millennials, the Generation Z. They're stakeholders, and they're, like as you mentioned earlier, if they don't feel like they're part of this organization and growing this organization, they're going to walk out the door. So you as managers, as business owners, we've had to change our perspective and thought process that, hey, let's create this. Yes, you want inclusivity, but you do want people thinking about their job when they're at home, because how can they make a change rather than just this is a 9-to-5 deal? So part of that means that we as policymakers, if you will, need to feel that everybody's a stakeholder. And part of that means, there's got to be transparency. People got to know where they stand, how do they move up. And so there's feedback, there's managers. And so a lot of communication, but we live in a world now that you can communicate, on your phone 24/7 if you want to.
Yeah, a lot of us are doing that, right? We're posting about this conversation and how exciting it is. I will say, right, the other, and I'm like, it's escaping me. We're talking about the managers and the feedback piece, right? There's also data that typically Latinos and Blacks or women in general won't get feedback because their supervisor is afraid or doesn't know, that am I doing it right or whatnot. But feedback is critical. It's not only being open to receiving it, but it's tough to give it too, right? So it's practicing that muscle. And so we'll open it up for a few questions before we wrap up. Don't all jump at once. Let's see if you have a question. And I don't know if we have a mic runner. Oh, there we go, Emmanuel, right there.
Javiera, you spoke about diversity in season ticket holders, and that was kind of something that was below what you expected related to what the community looks like in Houston. We've seen recently, and this is a question for Javier and Marissa too, the NFL have a huge push to expand internationally, whether that's in London or in Mexico, and kind of look for diversity in their fan base as well. My question for you is, Houston Texans being one of the last teams to be an expansion team in the NFL in 2002, or in any major sport, right? Baseball, NBA as well. Will we see a team in Mexico? Is the NFL product have enough elasticity to sell out, 8 games a year there versus 1 game? Is that something we'll see, in the near future? How far off is that of potentially happening?
I hope so. I mean, I know we enjoyed our time there in visiting in Mexico City, and is a great city and a great fan base. I mean, Mexican fans, you'll find them in every major NFL stadium on any given Sunday. So we know we've got a great fan base there, as well as Canada. But there's a lot of challenges that go into it. Not only just scheduling, you got 32 teams, but there's also safety concerns and those kinds of things. And then there's if you talk about Azteca Stadium, they've got challenges there too, because they don't have the same kind of ticketing we do. If you own a suite at Azteca Stadium when they built it, you own it for life. So there's some challenge that we have to get through. But believe me, I mean, NFL is big business, and to have more revenue growth, well, you got to go to different markets. So I'm hopeful that we will be in Mexico City, we'll be in London, we'll be in Germany, all those cities in my lifetime. I mentioned there were challenges, and so
I will tell you this: expanding our fan base internationally and getting more games internationally is a huge strategic priority for the league. So you will see advancement in that area. Now, how fast, and how quickly we can get all 32? Yes, there's challenges, but the games we had this year were outstanding. From sellout crowds at the stadiums to the viewership of those games. You're going to see expanded games in London next year. You're going to see 2 games in Munich. And we're going to continue to expand that base, and with our partnerships with clubs, we will work through all those kinks, right? It's kind of like the DEI journey. It'll be a journey, but it will continue to move forward. And by the way, I'm one of the most excited about that journey for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, Pedro Guerra, Director for the Illinois Latino Small Business Partnership at the Illinois Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. Before I ask my question, I'd like to thank HACE for organizing this event and the panel. Great information. My question is more of a career pathways from high school. One of the things that we at the Illinois Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, when we're talking to businesses in school, is trying to have a pipeline from high school into junior colleges to college. Does your organization have something similar when they're recruiting employees from a career pathways program?
So I'll go first. So yes, not. So there are a couple of ways, right, in terms of pathways in that are entry level, through talent acquisition, through internships with colleges and universities that help open the doors, right, to experiencing what it's like, and getting in through those, I guess we could call them more traditional pathways in. We also have a program that we call Telemundo Academy, which is a program that exposes kids from high school into the world of media and what that looks like. And specifically the various roles and departments that play into what ultimately an audience sees on TV or on streaming, right? And that includes behind the camera roles, in front of the camera roles, but also all of the support functions that help make it come through life. So for example, you could be a production assistant, you can be a set designer, you can be a costume designer, you can be a makeup artist. All of those roles are not traditional media roles that folks necessarily think about, and exposing high school students to that level of understanding of what it is to be exposed to media. And in our case, with Telemundo Academy, it's also helping them understand what Hispanic media looks like, right? You don't have to be an actor to work, right, in the media space, or as we call them, talent. It's huge because it really helps them to kind of rethink what a future looks like. There's a legal department, there's a finance department, there's a security department, and so on and so forth. So I think really having that ability to expose students as young as we can into that creative space and that creative world is really where that change happens, especially from an entry-level position, entry-level standpoint. Of course, there are numerous other programs and activities that we also have, both at NBC Universal and Telemundo, for mid-career entry points, right, that also speak to that. But I just really wanted to address your high school and college student sort of pathways that are beyond the traditional, and really helping them understand what a future in that world could look like.
Yeah, we have many. I'll speak to a couple that are, great. We have a phenomenal junior rotational program where we bring in, college students to, I guess it's 2 years, right? And they experience every single facet of the NFL, from, marketing to operations, to broadcast, media, finance, partnership. I mean, gosh, I wish I could have done that program. I would have learned so much about the league. So that's one. Something a little bit more non-traditional. We actually now have a huge network of what we call LCCs. They're lead content creators, and they come from all walks of life. So high school, college students, and they literally are our reporters, our feet on the ground. They go out to games, they capture helmets off content, right? They're talking to players, they're seeing, and they're really the ones telling the stories of what's happening, which is why, again, back to DEI, so important that these LCCs come from diverse backgrounds, so they the different stories. Those couple internships, all sorts of different ways that we try to bring in that young talent.
I'd like to add just high school kids are a little bit more challenging only because of their age, but you can volunteer. And I know, and then if you volunteer with some of the charitable groups that we're working with, that's one way to get exposed to it. But at that age, you really just want to get exposed to see a career path I really want. But ultimately, the internships, both from the Houston Texans level and my company, OTC Global Holdings, internships are very important to us because it gives us a really good advantage to someone, frankly, at an inexpensive level. Although we pay all our interns, I know some of our competitors don't pay them, but it gives you a good perspective to get to know a young person and then hopefully recruit them as they go through their college year. And so I know that's a really good way to do it. But the other thing I'd also mention is you give advice to your group. Many times, whether it's through a very formal process with the Houston Texans and a website to keep keep it a level playing field for those candidates. But you can't underemphasize the importance of relationships. When that intern is applying for it and he gets a letter of recommendation, that sometimes tips the scale. So I think leveraging those relationships, getting to meet people, volunteering, all those things can kind of set you up from the rest of the group.
And I would say that you all sharing your stories, whether it's this event today or other speaking engagements, because I know folks that are joining us at live stream, or perhaps that are at home, or their kids or young ones that are tuning in, this is inspirational to be able to see themselves represented in such influential and powerful roles. So thank you for being here and for sharing your stories. Just quick round of for those young people that are tuning in, piece of advice or a resource that you would share, and we'll wrap up.
Piece of advice is just reach for the stars. Don't let anything get in your way. You can do it. It's just, those are the same advice that I give my kids. So I would just really say, just don't take no for a no. Just keep at it.
I agree. I would follow that advice and just follow your dreams. And it comes with hard work, it comes with persistence. But if you're passionate about it, then you know what? My dream was to play professional football. But I soon found out that dream wasn't going to quite work out that way. But I ended up being an owner, and it's frankly a lot better.
Yeah, I would say make sure you understand the goals of the organization and the most senior leaders, and make yourself add value to those goals, because you will be seen when you contribute to the biggest goals that your leadership thinks about. And then surround yourself with a very diverse network. Don't just seek out people who look like you or think like you. Seek out the widest network you can, because that network will serve you well throughout your career.
So, good.
Yeah, great advice.
I was gonna say, so know how you bring value and make sure that you're showcasing that, surrounding yourself with diverse group of leaders, mentors, supporters. Be flexible. So you may have a certain dream, but it may take you in a different way towards that dream, right? And to reach for the stars and continue to, and I think that applies for all of us. So please join me in thanking our panelists for their time. And we have just enough time to walk out and to go to our networking reception for some drinks, hors d'oeuvres, networking, to get to connect with one another at Pala. So that's the restaurant. If you don't know how to get there, my team, or just talk to them and they'll make sure that you get there. So thank you again. And please join me in giving them a round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia.
Great.